When a 14-year-old Linwood High School girl was found murdered back in 1969, the investigation lost steam, and that case went cold. LA Times photojournalist Francine Orr met up with a team of amateur sleuths, a trio of curious schoolmates in their 60s who are now digging around for clues to this murder 50 years later. LA Times investigative reporter Laura Nelson joined us with more. What a fascinating story. Thanks for being here, Laura.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, tell us about Jan Marsh.
So Jan was 14 in the fall of 1969. She was a freshman at Linwood High School in the southeast area of LA County. She's the oldest of 5 children. They didn't have a lot of money. They grew up in what you might call kind of the wrong side of the tracks in Linwood, very close to the actual railroad tracks and in a very cramped apartment. And she was a bit of a loner. She had trouble being at home with her younger siblings and started running away from home shortly before she was found dead.
Yeah, what do we know about her death? Where was she found? What was the cause of death? And how did the investigation go?
So Jan's body was found in the morning in November of 1969 by a group of children who were walking to school at Linwood High School. Her body was found face down in the side yard of a little bungalow in a residential area of Linwood, and she had been strangled to death. The coroner of LA County determined that she had probably been killed sometime in the night before her body was discovered, but she didn't have any alcohol or drugs in her system, no other signs of violence other than the fact that she had been asphyxiated. The police had a number of suspects that they looked at in the first couple of weeks after her death, but they couldn't find any information that could trace Jan's death to either the house where she was found or to another location if her body had been moved there. And pretty shortly thereafter, the trail went cold.
Well, enter 3 women in their 60s who also went to Linwood High School but didn't know Jan. And they decide they're going to solve the mystery.
That's right. So the 3 women in this story are Cheryl Sanchez Simmons, Tina McKillop, and Rose Morales. They're all graduates of Linwood High School in the 1970s. And they went through their entire adult lives not knowing this story until a couple of years ago at a high school reunion. People started talking about Jan, who she was, whatever happened to her, did her murder ever get solved? And the following night at the big reunion party on the dance floor, Cheryl and Rose decided that they were going to have to do something about it, that they would try to solve the case themselves.
Yeah, it sounds like Only Murders in the Building, like a TV show.
We find the right connection, and all this cracks open.
These 3 women in their 60s getting together, each of them using skills that they had.
That's right. So Tina McKillop is a genealogical researcher. She specializes in connecting adoptees with their birth parents and has been doing this for 20 years. So she's very skilled in looking through government records and kind of navigating old arcane filing systems to dig up records of what happened in the 60s and 70s. Cheryl is extremely organized and she writes a mean letter. And by mean, I mean just, pointed and specific and perfect. And she's been in charge of kind of organizing the group's information. She maintains what they call their own murder book, which is a Microsoft OneDrive file where they have all of their suspects and evidence listed out. Then we have Rose Morales, who is chatty and charming, and she has been working the phones. So what they discovered is that if Rose can get on the phone with people, she can really get them talking. She bought a burner phone for her own safety, like an anonymous number, and sometimes uses a pen name, a fake name when she calls people and just tries to get them kind of delving into their memories to think about Linwood way back when.
Yeah, and just like Only Murders in the Building, it's not a straightforward investigation. There are twists and turns and obstacles.
That's right. I mean, they've now been at this for 3.5 years. So there have been many paths that they've gone down. Many have become dead ends, but they started out with a very wide array of suspects that they'd found through old police reports shared with them by a retired detective from Linwood Police Department. And they've kind of whittled it down to their list of the likely suspects, if you will. This has been, required a lot of phone calls and a lot of digging through old records, and also reaching out to the LA County Sheriff's Department, which took over the case, Jan's case, after the Linwood Police Department was dissolved in 1977. So on top of everything else, the police department that initially investigated the homicide no longer exists. It has been disbanded.
Yeah, and there's missing boxes of evidence and misspellings of Jan's names, all sorts of things to trip them up. All right, they haven't solved the case, but have they moved it forward? And what do authorities say? What about her family?
Well, they have, I think, come a lot closer than they were at the beginning of the investigation, but the authorities have said all along that it's a very difficult case to solve. It's a hard truth of a lot of cold cases is that the reason why they went cold is because they were very difficult to solve at the time. And over time, it only becomes more challenging to reach a conclusion. Particularly because the LA County Sheriff's Department has in their possession or had in their possession the box of physical evidence from Jan's case, which is to say the clothes that she was wearing when she was found dead, and the shirt, the men's shirt with long sleeves that had been used to strangle her, as well as swabs taken on her body by the coroner at the time of her autopsy. All of that evidence is now missing.
We don't know where it's at. We looked. We went to our warehouse and had them search for it. There's no documentation that it still exists.
And the sheriffs only discovered that after these women went to them and asked about it because they'd hoped that it would be used for DNA testing.
Will they keep going?
They are planning on continuing on this case. They've also identified 2 other homicides in Linwood around the same time, and they're interested in looking into those cold cases as well.
Laura Nelson is an investigative reporter for the LA Times. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.